A man goes up on a mountain and ascends to heaven from there. Another man goes up on a different mountain, meditates for a long time in a cave, and receives revelation. Yet another man, this will sound the most familiar, goes up on a mountain and returns with tablets of commandments. No, this is not the beginning of an interfaith joke. It is an overly simplified summary of Western religion. Whether it is Jesus going to heaven from the Mount of Olives, Muhammad encountering an angel on Mount Hira, or Moshe meeting God at Sinai, the Abrahamic religions share this triangle: God, prophet, mountain. But not every religion focuses on going up on mountains. In several Eastern traditions, including Buddhism and Hinduism, pilgrims circle their holy mountain in Tibet. Every year, thousands make the journey around Mount Kailash without ever ascending it. For me, a good hike has always been about reaching the peak. In fact, I have imagined my path to becoming a rabbi and my time at JTS as a yellow brick road leading up to its own Har Kadosh, its own holy mountain. There, God's palpable presence would be felt, a place where access to Torah is direct and unobstructed. There, the tablets would be handed over to me, so to speak. Here, I would spend 5 years of my life dedicated to Talmud Torah, which I might add is much longer than Moshe had on his mountain. Now that those 5 years are nearly over, I have to ask myself, could I ascend this holy mountain? Did I? We learn in our parasha that with the exception of Moshe and few others, the mountain was untouchable. Kol hanogea bahar mot yumat. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. Humans were prohibited from not only ascending, but even touching the border of the humble hill that was Sinai. The people's first meeting with God was from a distance, as if they were in a shomer negia relationship with their creator, lest the direct meeting with God completely consume them. Multiple times, God reminds Moshe of the injunction not to touch the mountain. Our commentators ask why God repeats God's self, and so does Moshe. You already warned us, Moshe says. The Or HaChaim, a prominent 18th century Moroccan commentator, explains the repetition by giving insight into God's knowledge of human nature. He says that an increased warning was necessary because God knew that the people would want to come closer to the source once revelation began. They would want to get a glimpse of God regardless of the consequences. The Israelites would give their lives just to be close, to be unified with God. With the additional warning, as if God said, I'd rather have you separated from me, but alive. I think God's assumption about the nature of humanity is correct. I too want to touch and ascend the mountain. This was one of the main motivators in becoming a rabbi, to gain dveikut, attachment to God. I thought that conquering the heaps of 1,000-year-old texts and mastering rituals attempting to reach the heavens would help crystallize my faith. When I will get face to face with God like a friend, or at least see their back, then I won't have to struggle in my post-enlightenment doubts. Then I will be ready to shuffle the teachings up and down the mountain to my people, like Moshe did. Here I am, soon officially named a shuffler of Torah. Yet I have constantly found myself at the foot of the mountain, guarding my touch with the rest of Bnei Israel. My time in rabbinical school was not like I imagined it. The constant absorption in Torah that I expected was often blurred by the noise of New York City, by finding the right internships and by having to make dinner instead of doing chazarah, by comforting a newborn while preparing for my comprehensive exams. In other words, life got in the way of my plans to climb the mountain. I might have felt separated from God, but I remained very much alive, just like the Israelites who were barred from the mountain in order to save their lives. The hardest part of experiencing revelation from a distance is that the Israelites, we, are left in fear and confusion. I sought to go up on the mountain and answer questions like which laws and words of the Torah were truly revealed by God, and what is the role of the prophet in transmitting those words? And most importantly, to assure myself, what from the bottom looks like a dense cloud is in fact God, right? A God that created the universe and who intervenes in history. I did conquer, if not all, but some of those heaps of texts. And I can explain to you revelation from the perspective of documentary hypothesis, and I can quote plenty of midrashim about what happened at Sinai. Yet the cloud is often all I see. Like everyone else at the base of the mountain, I cannot quite make sense of revelation. As I'm trying to put the pieces together as I sit down below, I realize that perhaps the climb is not the role of a rabbi, not to be atop Har Sinai, but to stand with the trembling people below. Not something I can achieve while sitting in an ivory tower or exclusively in a Beit Midrash. After all, who was with the Israelites when they were experiencing existential dread amidst the thunder and the lightning and horn blasts? Who was holding their hand and pastoring them? Moshe had to leave the people in order to meet God, and his absence was felt. Later in our narrative, during one of Moshe's departures, the people built the golden calf. They said, Lo yadanu mehayalo. We do not know what happened to him. Moshe leaving the people without a fitting leader culminated in one of the greatest sins in the Torah. Moshe running up and down the mountain meant that he had to straddle two distinct universes, the one on top with God and the one below with the people. I might have little access to the universe above, but I do not want anyone to say about me, Lo yadanu mehayala. Where was she? We do not know what happened to her. While I haven't achieved the nearness to God, or sometimes even the faith in God that I craved coming here, I have learned how to be present for the others who are also confused and terrified. JTS prepared me to lead, guide, comfort, interpret, and often simply just be at the foot of the mountain. Admitting my place in relation to Har Sinai has not always been easy, as I'm afraid that people, my future congregants, expect our rabbi to be on a mountain, to be organically close to God and always immersed in our tradition. At times, I feel shame that I cannot spend my life learning enough Torah because I have Zoom meetings to attend and diapers to change, and I cannot be enmeshed completely with God because my skepticism will always interrupt. Though I mourn not achieving the spiritual ecstasy or purity that I have longed for these past 5 years, the bottom of the mountain is where I learned how to integrate the part of myself who longs for holiness and the part who is rooted in marvelous and messy mundaneness. Learning Gemara on a stuffed subway or leading davening through a computer screen taught me that there is plenty of Kedusha at the base camp of Sinai. I am not the only one who found holiness at the foot of the mountain. God tells Moshe, "V'higbalta et ha'am saviv," you shall set bounds for the people round about. Several commentators explain that this commandment requires a physical boundary to be set that protects the people from the mountain. What is this boundary? The Meshech Chochmah, a 19th century Eastern European commentator, has a beautiful and creative interpretation. He translates et ha'am not as for the people, but with the people. He understands the boundary around the mountain to consist of the people, kind of like an image similar to the pilgrims gathering in Tibet. The Israelites represent a transitional space between that which is holy and untouchable and the external world completely devoid of God. Dr. Aviva Zornberg paraphrases Emmanuel Levinas and names the boundary as the willingness of the human being to be the site of transcendence. By agreeing to form a circle around the mountain, we are opening ourselves to the possibility of revelation extending to us. God's glory, which in its fullness would annihilate an average person, can still radiate in reduced dosage, reaching the people who are forming the border. By gathering to embrace the sacred mountain, we are permitting ourselves to be affected by a little bit of God's radiating light, even if we are not able to fully decipher the words uttered from above. Unlike the ancient Israelites who were instructed by Moshe to form the boundary, contemporary Israelites have a choice. Will we stand around the mountain even though we cannot ascend? Or will we run away from fear, confusion, maybe disbelief? Once revelation starts, the Israelites are so petrified that they fall back and stand at a distance. But they do not flee. Will we opt in to receiving the Torah, even though after learning it again and again and again, we still often do not understand what God wants of us? Will we open ourselves to the possibility of a transcendental God, even if our rational capacities fight it? Are we willing to be the site of transcendence? I would be lying if I said that I do not envy Moshe or other men of the mountain for their encounters on their respective holy hills and their certainty of faith. But like the Buddhists and Hindus who surround their mountain, I recognize that the work is at the bottom. I want to dedicate my life to organizing the circle around our mountain. I will invite people to join in forming the boundary, convincing them that it is worth taking the risk of fear and confusion for the potential of feeling a fraction of divinity. No, the foot of the mountain does not come with the unambiguous view of the mountaintop. And no, it also does not come with a signposted trail leading directly to God. But it is where Bnei Israel are. And wherever Bnei Israel are, my place is there.